The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. We're on. Hello, everybody. I promised the gentleman on the call a 5 count, but it is what it is. We'll fix it in post or whatever. So, hello, everybody. I'm Brian. It is a special Thursday episode of the BrakeSec stream. I normally do these on Tuesdays and Fridays, but oh my goodness! Thank you, Triplexity. Thank you so much for subscribing for 11 months in a row. I was just talking to John and Jerod here about we're celebrating our 1-year anniversary on almost the same weekend as the invasion of Ukraine, which is sad, but it was a good first stream that we did there with Sunflower Con. But we're doing a special Thursday edition. We'll be here tomorrow as well when I go over and we start doing some Golang stuff and we start playing around with some Golang tutorials. So, but I appreciate everybody who can join us today. So. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and get started because I always like doing interviews because it makes my job easier because I don't have to talk all the time and get uncomfortable or sweaty or whatever. But I'd like to welcome John and I'd like to welcome Jerod to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thanks you for having us.
Appreciate it. Right on. So as we're fond of saying here when we do our podcast, and this will go out as an audio podcast as well for those of you who are listening to the audio podcast, welcome, and also to the stream. I'd like to start with John, and I get a little background here. I went to B-Side San Diego because, as I've told many of you, I'm moving to San Diego in July, and we have a house down there just in Mira Mesa. For those of you in Seattle or San Diego, you know where that is. And I got to see John speak, and I was intrigued because I was like, this is unlike any talk I've seen. Because one, the slides are the slides, and it was like, I don't need the slides to follow along, which is always nice. But I got I got to talking with him afterwards, and I'm on my, I was on my, hey, InfoSec really sucks for these reasons. He's like, yes, I totally agree with this, and we need to have a conversation. And I was afraid he was Hollywooding me a little bit, but he reached out on LinkedIn and said, hey, let's make this happen. I was like, okay, cool. So it took a bit because I think we saw each other in October, but finally got all the wheels turning and everything. And he's like, oh yeah, hey, my good friend Jerod is also doing some awesome stuff, and we should invite him. So I was like, yes, let's do that too. So, John, thank you so much for taking the time, and Jerod, thank you so much for taking the time. And would like John to give a little bio, and then we can do a little bio with Jerod, and then we can go ahead and start talking about some of the topics that we have in our show outline. So go ahead and John, take it away, John.
I think the best way, Brian, is my LinkedIn profile says I'm the founder CEO of Aronetics. And I'm also a cross-country runner, a traditional climber, an international cyclist. I know how to persevere and get stuff done.
Okay. That's way more than I've ever accomplished. So that is what it is. But
it keeps things necessary where I need to keep them. Like I was a systems administrator at an Ohio multinational company. I was the last network administrator at Kent State University. I was a field technician around the Southeast United States when I was a teenager. Way too young for a cell phone, if I may say for myself. So I think it fits of where I am now.
Oh, very cool. Okay. Yeah. And I posted up the LinkedIn to John there, and he's one of those Lions open LinkedIn persons. So, you can go and check out what he's doing. And I think we showed his blog on Tuesday during the stream a little bit, talking about some of those things. So it's a very interesting blog, very short, very nice tidbit little bits, which is awesome. They're not overly long. So, but Jerod, I've not met Jerod, so I met him today, right now. Jerod, tell us a little bit about yourself. How you got to be in InfoSec and what you do for a living.
Yeah, John's brief intro, Brian, is challenging me to keep it short. He knows that I have a tough time with brief explanations, but I'm maybe 20 years into my career, give or take. You get to a point you stop counting and just start using big round numbers. But my joke is that I've earned every gray hair in my beard, and for folks watching the video, you can see there are quite a few of them. I went to school to be a music teacher in Columbus. Got kicked out of my student teaching experience because I disagreed with the teacher, and it was disruptive from a personal stance to think you're going to go do one thing and then realize, no, that's not the plan, that's not the path. And I mentioned I would have been kicked out, fired from my first teaching job within a year because I struggle with administration and bureaucracy, and I'm more more one-on-one, small group. I don't do well in those big settings. But I've been a nerd my whole life, right? Cut my teeth playing around with an Apple IIe and thought I'll try this IT thing, which led me to security, which led me to building and managing security programs, to being a pen tester, to working with vendors and kind of customer facing sales roles, and then product facing education roles, so that the thing companies are building to help us secure the world are actually the things that people want and that people would use. And all that's led me to where I am now. I'm a virtual CISO with Side Channel.
Nice.
They're a recently public company out of Massachusetts who drops cybersecurity programs in for especially startups and mid-market. So I work with a handful of clients who I walk in on day one and they say, all right, cybersecurity, what do we do? And it's my job to build a roadmap and help them kind of build and grow the programs out in a way that fits, because you guys know, and I'm sure everybody listening in knows, cybersecurity is not one size fits all. It varies significantly from one organization and the next. We start with some of the same principles and foundational ideas, but then when it comes to implementation and actual risk appetite and all these other pieces, company culture, right? We've got to adjust. So that's the life I'm living. And then I do a lot of teaching. I teach in person. I teach online. I've got almost 30 classes in LinkedIn's library now, LinkedIn Learning. So nice. Any chance I have to teach people what I've learned, so it doesn't suck as much for you as it did for me, that's time well spent. That's me doing my thing and giving back. So that's Jerod in a nutshell.
Very cool. Okay. All right. So we have some topics. When I reached out to John, one of the things he helped me out with, he was like, oh yeah, you also do podcasts as well. I don't want to say just podcasts, but John does podcasts, some of the Red Hat, what's the name of the podcast? It's Red Hat
X.
Okay.
They've been discontinued. But
sorry.
But it was a good run.
We're one of the last companies to be featured, and we have a total of 6 podcasts. Jerod has been included on podcast 4, 5, and 6, and I did 1, 2, and 3 myself.
Okay.
And I was like, this is interesting, but there's something missing. And I reached out to one person and said, hey, could I have your help on the next podcast? And that was podcast 4 and podcast 5 and podcast 6. And Jerod has had a full, otherwise insightful way to see how I see technology and where we're going. We probably agree 8 or 9 out of 10 times.
That's fair.
Sometimes I'm too rogue, probably why I failed out an FBI special agent test, but I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm helping out in other ways.
Very nice. Okay. So the talk at B-Side San Diego was talking about some of the zero trust and the fact that the perimeter keeps changing, and that and we've talked about this in the past on other podcasts. It was like, it used to be you want to protect the servers, and it was like, you started talking about models like eggs and bricks and coconuts, where it's like you have a hard, crunchy outside, and then once you get inside, it's really ugly and whatever. And that, you're either an egg, you're a coconut, or you're a brick. You had mentioned, and on the blog post you had mentioned, that the edge devices are no longer devices; they're people. That's the new edge, right?
That's what it is, yeah.
And
that's a problem.
Why is that a problem? That's
the
the
internet
setup,
wasn't
by the
made
way.
for
So
that. The
the
internet
internet
wasn't
was not
made for
made
that,
for it.
though.
Okay.
It was never made with you being a node.
Right.
When I went to a government thing in Columbus, again at Ohio State, and this was an invite from a 5-letter agency named DARPA. And
Right.
the one-liner there was, sorry, not sorry, we made GPS. It has its uses. It has its otherwise uses too.
Right.
And it's that nature of security. It's that nature of game-changing security, game-changing technology.
Right. So when I wasn't there when the internet was, Lady P, if she joins us, one of our moderators, worked on some of the original DARPA and the original nodes of those things. There was no security, right? It was freedom. Back in the day, this was when, users and groups were like the access controls, and that was avant-garde because everybody could share everything. When did we decide that, I don't know, we're going to get a history lesson here, but I was like, what decided the need for security at that point? It was like first users and groups, and it was all based on the honor system. It seems like the more security that we've needed, it's, there was less honor or less trust there. So as it's an inverse thing, the less we trust, the more security we have to build in. Right. So,
right. I think like most user groups, Brian, Jerod, that it's the core group that makes it. And that when it becomes popular, you have many other people playing in the core group. And then it gets super popular, you have all these other people playing. And it's kind of like we're internet juxtaposed with climbing, how climbing's popular nowadays.
Right.
Yeah, I think what I'd add to that, Brian, is as soon as folks figured out how to break things and show the people who built these earlier technologies, oh, look, I can make it do something you didn't intend it to do, then, they've got a decision tree. Was this something that I didn't know we could do, but wow, that's cool. Let's build that into the next release. Or I got to watch my language here. Holy heck. Maybe we shouldn't let people just do that. I think back, I'm sure, folks in the stream know Chris Roberts and the I don't want to say trouble he got into, because I don't know where that actually landed when it was talking on the plane, and you get so far into the environment, it's an open system and there's no restriction, no firewalls, no authentication. And someone who's not supposed to be there can make something do stuff it's not supposed to do. And when we have these moments, when we have these watershed moments, if it's big enough and scary enough or damaging enough, then I think that's enough to push back on the people who are building and maintaining the technologies to say, all right, we need a new version, we need a new release, we need a new architecture. We're seeing it right now with cryptography. And I say right now, NIST has been working on post-quantum cryptography for 5 years. It's just we're not talking about it as much in the day-to-day as we should be. Right. But if you look at the math behind the new algorithms, it's a whole different way of thinking. It's not very large prime numbers anymore. It's not just throwing so much at the data or so much at the encryption process that it would take a very long time to recreate that mechanism. It's using, like some of the algorithms using lattice-based math, which is a whole just different approach. And that's the trend that I've seen. And again, I'm going to play the graybeard here, is every time something big enough comes along to scare the legitimate users of the technology to say, oh no, we can't use this or trust it without putting ourselves in harm's way, then the builders come along and say, all right, we're going to make it better. And that's where that balance between trust and security, it's forefront of those conversations.
Did either of you two see the release from China 2 days ago with regard to quantum technology and quantum math?
I haven't seen it.
And how they broke RSA, but there's a few issues with their math.
Okay. Kind of like the one NIST algorithm that the guy broke with a laptop from Micro Center. that one of the candidates got booted out because somebody found a clever way to circumvent the just the design that the mathematician had in mind. So yeah, we just went around it. And his statement when they broke it was, "I didn't even think of that." And it's interesting, John. I'll have to read that.
And then
read up on that.
And to go like back a whole step, like I've mentioned on a few other places, those people breaking things back then had ethics.
Right.
They knew good and bad. I mean, it was a core group of people. I mean, I met up with, leave his name anonymous. He's the algorithm architect of Splunk. And I shared my one slide of my presentation next Thursday to the Ohio State University Women's Cybersecurity. And he's like, of course, just move the bit. It's an old trick. I'm like, it's a Twitter meme nowadays.
Right.
And it's a Twitter meme of some young lady holding her grandma in her walker, and the grandma in the walker is just flip the bit. And it's like, yes, mom, just go to bed first.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I hadn't heard about this Chinese claims. I actually posted it in, I don't know how legitimate the South China Morning Post is, but I posted the links in our chat there. I don't follow Southeast Asia's news press. It's not Pravda or whoever it is, but I don't know if it's the Fox News of South China or what have you. But well, that's neither here nor there. So we're talking about the inverse of trust and security here. Jerod was talking about some decentralization of technologies that he's talking about, and one of the I think one of the biggest decentralizations that has happened in the past decade is the rise of the cryptocurrencies. And I have been thinking about this, and I've been trying to figure out if there's actually a talk about this, but it's like, and this goes to the, security and trust inverse. It's like everybody seemed to trust cryptocurrency so much that they forgot about the security part. And, you've got, the FTXs of the world, and, trust us because, hey, we're rich is the new trust here. And what I'm trying to figure out is why and how do trust models work like that? Where it's like, hey, I'm rich and so can you. And it's like, everybody immediately trusts crypto at that point. And then they're surprised when things like, oh, well, they cashed out and went to, the South Georgia coast or whatever, or,
big giant mansion, or they,
Lambos for days and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
How did that trust model happen without the security part? I mean, how did that get so off kilter in that respect? And
NFT bros. I stand by that, Brian. I've got crypto in a couple of places. Just exploring it. I want to understand it as a cybersecurity professional, who's doing what. And what, when we say crypto, right, the idea that comes to mind is like Bored Ape Yacht Club, and I can go create all these Pokemon card style images, wrap some kind of signature around them, and then drop them out on a blockchain, and somebody will pay me 300 times what it costs me in a minute. And then you got the rug pulls and people coming in. The pump and dump where they get everybody to think, oh, this is the next hot coin, and they leave. And as all this activity has been driven by people who are trying to make money on the quick, right? Get in, get out. It's the same problem we see in the VC space and the private investment space, where companies come in and have no intention of building a tech company up to be something useful or helpful. They want to get their investment and then they want to get out. It's the same problem, the same principles applied in the more Wild West of crypto. And I think it's really not that people trusted it or thought it was secure. They had dollar signs in their eyes thinking they could get in and get rich quick too, and were willing to roll the dice. It's the same mentality that leads people to have gambling problems. If I drop $10 on the Bengals and they win the Super Bowl, then I come home with how much. And that's where I see it. And, I was talking to you a bit earlier that I I am a huge blockchain fan. Blockchain, Web3, decentralized, whatever you want to call the technology, whatever makes you most comfortable, use the language that belongs to you. I absolutely believe that that is the way we're going, from a technology space, from a security space, from interacting with people around the world. It's out and open, and that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah, you didn't see my eye twitch involuntarily when you said the B word. That's another B word that we don't, that we try not to use around here. I worry that the blockchain stuff is thrown around too much as a marketing term, and much like zero trust, which John had mentioned quite a bit. Nobody really knows what zero trust is, and depending on who's selling what, zero trust is the way, and so is the blockchain.
We do zero trust. Buy our stuff this quarter, right? Help us meet our quota. Yeah,
right. And so I don't do marketing, so I get turned off when anybody opens up with things like blockchain, ML, AI, those things. How is blockchain the future?
I'm going to come at this from two angles. I'm going to come at it from the social angle, and then I'll bring it back around to the technology angle. From the social angle, and I say this as a parent of 3 adult children. What's a oxymoron, right? But all of my kids are adults now, so I've gone through the process of seeing them grow up and seeing how they interact with their peers, how they interact with technology. I put technology in their hands at a very young age so that they wouldn't be scared of it. They wouldn't be afraid to experiment and try things out with it. They'd understand how to be responsible digital citizens, knowing that we that was pre-iPod that I was doing this, and now we're in a world where I've got the most powerful computer in my pocket, right? It rivals a Star Trek data pad.
Right.
From a social standpoint, if we look at generational theory, and I can look at work from sociologists, and or I think that's the right term, end up in books like The Fourth Turning, we see patterns. And I'm going to try my hardest to get this right. And I'm using the traditional quote. I'm not using this as a gender or sexist language. Just want to be very clear. What is it? Hard men create soft times. Soft times create soft men. Soft men create hard times. Hard times create hard men. If you've ever heard that saying, that adage, that axiom, whatever the word is, it speaks to the notion that the world that each generation is born into comes with rules that we accept and rules that we break. And as each generation establishes who they want to be and how they want to be and how they want to interact with the world around them, they set rules for the next generation that the next generation is either going to accept or break. Right. And we see patterns. If you look at the 4 generations and then 4 generations, that book, The Fourth Turning, goes back centuries, pointing out where some of these patterns appear to have manifested themselves. As a parent of now adult children, my kids are not after the hustle. They're not glorifying the grind. They're not seeking the 80 hours. They're also, like my parents, not 30 years in a pension, right? Their perspective is they want to take care of the people around them. They want to make sure they can afford food and housing and medicine, and they want to have a place to live they're not going to be kicked out of by a landlord who decides that they're not a profitable investment. And these are the people who are building technology. They're coming to the fore, and they're learning all the languages, and they're going to work for tech companies and then getting laid off, and then they're coming together saying, man, that was awful. That should not have happened. I should not be at the beck and call of some corporate overlord who's going to control me with benefits and salary. I'm going to go make my own thing. And the things that they're building are not for the benefit of controlling or dominating the market. They're trying to create things that enable communication and enable these ideals that older generations take a look at and say, that's, go back a few generations, just a bunch of hippies. That's hippie talk. It'll never stick. It'll never land. And what I think some folks have a a blind spot to is that there's a real potential for change here. And there are people who are implementing that change. So that's the social side of it. Now, if I apply that to the technology side, Web 2 technology, if I go from Web 1 to Web 2, we're enabling users to create content, but large centralized organizations are controlling the content. And if what was the Netflix CEO just made a comment, we have never canceled a successful show. How do you define successful? Is a successful show one that has a significant cultural impact, one that changes how people think about how they're going to interact with the world around them? Or is a successful show one that returns X amount of dollars on the cost of production and marketing? Right. So there's a way of thinking. Yeah. As you look at the financial side of it, or the technical side of it, instead of having a large centralized organization that controls all the money and controls the benefits and then rewards the CEO with not only an exorbitant salary, but a golden parachute. Now you have the concept of decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, which is core to this Web3 blockchain technology, to say we're going to put something out into the world, and it's going to run in a way that we don't have one person controlling everything or one central organization controlling anything. And if we get away from the NFT gold rush and look at how can we build trust by having a distributed ledger with automated compute-based activities built on logic into the blockchain, so that when a thing happens, I have multiple nodes who can validate that you can trust this one and not that one. And John's heard my pitch. If we take this and look at identity in particular, and digital identity, we have the capability of following Jack Dorsey's Web 2, Web 3 model, his whole developer TBD jam,
Web 5.
and saying, what's that?
Web 5.
Right.
Web 5. Yeah. But in this model, you can build out decentralized authentication mechanisms. You can build out a combination or a workflow between the decentralized authentication and maybe a centralized data store for certain sensitive data elements. And if we had a blockchain technology today, Brian, that every time somebody wanted to use my social security number, they had to ask me, and we leveraged a blend of Web 2 and Web 3 technologies to have that show up on my phone, right, John? And this is where your tech is so stinking important. But it shows up on my phone and says, hey, Jerod, are you applying for this car loan? Are you applying for unemployment benefits? Are you trying to get a loan for a house? Or are you the one filing this medical claim for insurance? Right? If that was real time talking to me directly and I went out to the blockchain to validate it, I can take my social security number, Brian, and put it in the public space, because it doesn't have to be confidential information anymore. That 9-digit number does not have to be the secret code that people have to ask me for, because I don't care about the number. I care about the transaction. And that's where I see, you've got these altruistic, idealistic kids coming up saying, I want a better world. And then you've got this technology that says, hey, here's how you build it. And you put those two in a room and it's like magnesium and water. It's just explosive. It's getting me all fired up. But that gets back to, why I think that the hype around blockchain is slowing us down, because people are looking at the marketing saying this is garbage, and they're missing out on the beauty of what we can build there.
What it could be.
But yeah, John, this is where I want to go to you, because when we talk about, okay, well, how are we going to do this? It's going to have to hit me somehow. I'm saying it's my phone, right? And now I'm saying I'm the node, I'm the edge, I'm the perimeter. There's no centralized security team keeping me safe. I need that ability to protect myself built into the technology that I use to conduct these transactions.
I remember sharing earlier before we hopped on here that I was traveling around in the Southeast United States when I was 19 years old, carrying a thing we called a cell phone.
Right.
And that was a game changer. It will change the way you think, because you can call anyone anytime. You can also receive a phone call from anyone anytime. It's that sort of transformative paradigm shift that we had without even thinking about it. So I know parents nowadays, Jerod, that have no technology until they're 18.
Wow.
And
And I've seen Social Dilemma.
They grow up really wholesome and really well to do. They understand it as a tool.
Right. Right. So Jerod, what you're trying to say is that the LifeLock CEO was about 15 years too early with regards to posting his social security number everywhere.
And misguided. I think he was doing it for his own personal benefit. I think he had hoped that by putting it up on all those billboards that people would buy his stuff. And that's his mistake, right? He was doing it for the wrong reasons, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about, the real, blockchain and everything's kind of gotten lost in the marketing, and we could say the same thing for the zero trusts of the world. Yeah. Is that because we have allowed marketing people to pull us along with the nose ring that we have? Is the tail wagging the dog there, where we need to maybe rein in marketing people and go, look, stop what you're doing. We see it with security people all the time and those things. If we don't have a different point of view, how are we going to know any different? If all of the messaging comes from the marketing people, who are we going to listen to if it's not the marketing people or the PR people? It's definitely not the security people, because they're all at security conferences, talking to the echo chamber, which that's what I was talking with John about at B-Side San Diego. Who do we listen to? Because obviously the only people that are, putting that out, PR and marketing and public relations folks, they have a spin that they want to put on it. So who do we need to listen to? Who needs to be giving that information to us?
I think I can add that my entrance to the RSA conference this year, I don't recall the sponsorship to even participate in the marketplace of how pricey that actually is. Which really just brings me back to, how do you market a company like this that doesn't want to spend $15,000 to $35,000 to advertise at RSA?
Right.
I don't have an Indy car to drive around in circles and say, look at my logo. I'm not naming names, but.
No, and there are a few you can name. That's not just one, right? That's that's common. That's the benefit that I've had in my career. I have intentionally sought out jobs that make me uncomfortable. And I spent roughly 5 years working in sales roles with technology organizations. Now, in all fairness, I got paid well, because turns out the closer you are to generating revenue in a large organization, the higher the salary. And again, as a father and husband, I'm grateful for the opportunity to take care of my family. But I know when I went into those, I was fortunately far enough along in my career that I could set ground rules to say, this is how I'm going to approach what I do. I'm not selling anybody anything. I'm going to teach them about the problem. And if our solution helps them solve the problem, great. If not, it means I'm not going to make quota. And that's an uncomfortable conversation to have with an account exec who's very quota driven. But especially if you work, and this is me putting the word out for any listeners who are in a technical sales oriented role, stand your ground and spend more time teaching and consulting than selling. And I say that because the challenge I see, Brian, is not just the marketing organization. They're a symptom of the challenge we're talking about right now is a symptom of a larger systemic issue. If we've got large investment firms throwing ridiculous amounts of money at cybersecurity companies saying, build a thing, then they're also saying, and give us our money back threefold, fivefold, tenfold, right? There's that notion of return on investment. And if you drop a CEO into the organization whose goal it is to make that money back, you've already lost. That's where everything else begins to fall apart. And if you look at Jim Collins, has two books on the market, Good to Great and Built to Last. And both of them, he brought together research teams to gather data on why over decades certain companies grew to be successful, trusted household names, and others, were, what is it, Highlander, the burning out rather than fade away, right?
Yep.
They flame out and they're gone. And there is a lot to be said about the caliber of leadership of individuals who take on that CEO role and who say, I'm not here to make money. I'm here to do right by my employees, who are going to do right by my customers, who are then going to pay for the thing we're building, because that's how this is supposed to work. And when you've got the street, which you'll hear if you work in any of these organizations, breathing down your neck saying, what's your year on year, right? What are your comps? What's your quarterly earnings, right? What are you going to be telling us on that call in 3 months? CEOs who are less confident, less courageous, will balk, and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice principles and morals for the sake of a quick buck. And that's when you start down that path. And I've worked in organizations where unfortunately I felt the CEOs didn't take the stance that I believe they should have. And I've worked with CEOs who've said, I don't care what they say, I know what the right thing to do is, and I'm going to stay my course. And I think in the current centralized model, when we're talking about technology and security and marketing and zero trust and all these language, right? It all goes back to that C-suite, that leadership. And you got to take a long, hard look at who's sitting in that chair and say, which way are you going here? What's your motivation? Are you doing right by us, or are you trying to earn a quick buck for the shareholders?
Right.
And it's the same mentality that kills blockchain in the NFT bro space. People who are in it for a quick buck are so loud and obnoxious and overbearing that the people who are doing good work get lost in the noise.
Right.
I flew to Orlando to go to a conference to meet up with, I can say his name, everyone knows him, maybe you guys attend his talks too, but Dr. Chase Cunningham.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually met and said, hey, collaborative conversation. But there's organizations that were at that conference that their only goal is to IPO this year and get shareholder return.
Sure.
And that seems to be a bad motivation, especially with all the news of everything coming out. And I hope that 2019, how the internet went to a swamp cesspool, actually helps people think this is not the world I want to live in.
Right.
Which is why you have the blockchain of all youth saying, I don't want to live this way anymore.
Right.
If it's supposed to be a secret social security number, well, the attackers have it tenfold. How are you going to keep it secret?
Thank you, credit reporting agencies. Thank you, Office of Personnel and Management.
Yeah.
These secrets aren't secret anymore, and we're just pretending that they are.
Well, I've mentioned this more than once on the show. I have no more privacy because I was a government civilian. I was a veteran, and Equifax got the rest of it. So I got 2 OPM letters back in the day. I got Equifax. They got everything else. So I don't have any privacy. Everybody's like, "Oh, what are you sharing all your information for?" I'm like, I have friends who have OSINT capabilities. Joe Gray. We've talked to Joe Gray several times, and he could find me. I mean, I'm not hard to find. I'm fairly public. You can find where I live. I don't have any privacy. I think privacy is a myth these days. Only unless you've just recently popped out the uterus. But even then, your social security number is going to get leaked. I mean,
and then you're a target, because if I can get your social when you're in the nursery, right, I've got 18 years to use it before you even realize you've been popped.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Kids, unfortunately, are a target. And I'm with you, Brian. Go ahead. I want to hear where you're going.
Okay. So, I just, we're talking here about, decentralization and all that. And, I don't have any privacy, but one of the things that the idea of the blockchain and the cryptocurrency was, no government intervention. We don't have to worry about that pesky government, being able to move information and buying pizzas for a whole block, Bitcoin back in the day.
Right.
The minute people start losing money, what do? They clamber for control. They clamber for centralization. It's like, oh, I've lost $45 million in FTX. It's like, oh, well, government help me. And the government's like, I don't. So what I'm trying to figure out is there must, again, the trust and security. It's like, where do we find that happy balance of, we don't want the government interfering with stuff, but we want the government to help us when everything goes pear-shaped. And, where do we go with that?
There's a book I can add to the chat called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. And I've read this book over and over and over. And you see it worldwide. And it's discerning that I also turned down the Boeing accelerator to take my technology to Saudi Arabia because I was uncomfortable with taking my technology to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Yeah. Like I'm sorry, I don't ethically agree with how you live your life. I'm not going to impose my morals on you. Carry on. I'll carry on too.
Right. Yeah.
And what I'd offer up to that, I read a lot. That's just part of being the nerd. And that is a term I use with love and affection for anybody listening. I want to be absolutely clear. Nerds are my people. It's I've read a lot of Orson Scott Card, and he's got some interesting takes on the role of government, whether it's Ender's Game and some of the that series, or Empire, which is another perspective. But I think that again, it's difficult to talk about any one subject without bringing in other disciplines, other areas. And when you look at the role of government, and then the role of private industry and organizations, we especially in the United States, we're constantly challenging where that line is and what the balance is. I think that's just the nature of our government, or our current relationship, that we're trying to figure out. Is the government's role just to keep us safe from physical threats, or are there more things like financial threats that they should be involved in? And I don't want to get on that soapbox tonight. I don't want any death threats, but I do think civil discourse and conversations around what that right balance is, and then having those conversations with people who disagree with you, is how we move forward, or how we answer some of those questions. And I'm with you that having I'm going to say little privacy. I can't say no privacy, because no privacy means you've got my Gmail password, right? If you've got the ability to go in and read my conversations, or you can get on my phone and read my text messages, then then that's the full Orwellian 1984 world.
Well, that's the thing with passwords, that everyone who wants to say they don't mind having their password, but no one actually gives it up. Nobody
shares it, unless you're on like Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon, or one of those shows where they socially engineer you. But I do look. So quick plug. I'm a member of the EFF. I've been supporting the organization for years. Cannot speak highly enough about the fact that they're looking at these challenges we have around digital privacy from a legal perspective, from a social perspective, and from a technical perspective. And by bringing those disciplines together, and then being the advocates we need in chambers where decisions are being made, I think that helps drive it forward. And as I look at again, innovation, if we enable technologies that let us take control of the things that we've lost control of, then we have an opportunity, Brian, to win some of that privacy back. But it's not going to come from us giving folks 2 thumbs up and say, go do it. We've got to start using the apps that are privacy centric. We've got to start supporting the organizations who are hiring people who are privacy centric. And as they're building technologies and taking them to CES in Vegas and saying, yeah, we do everything that they do, but we do it with your privacy in mind. And people say, that's the differentiator. I will pay you for that. Then that puts food on their table, lets them take care of their families, lets them go into work the next day and keep building those things. So I think we can get it back. But
I'll make every breach notification that we hear from every company is we take your privacy seriously.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that it is in their playbook that they have to say that.
I think it's a legal thing.
Right. They don't care about your privacy until it actually affects them.
Well, it's funny. You see Apple's mantra on billboards in New York City and everywhere else, that Apple takes your privacy seriously. It's 2022, 2023. Apple's a corporation, began in the 80s. Kind of rocky beginning. It's not a history of that. But when Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, it was geolocation. You can have the web on there. You can have all these things, but never mind. You are now the perimeter. And security of you or of your mobile phone is a second or third party conversation.
Right.
You see, I don't watch television commonly, but you do see the Google ads on Google hunting you. I think that Daryl and John Oates, I think it is, or whatever ad that is.
Yeah, that's a creepy song. Yeah. Every step you take, I'll be
watching police.
You. Yeah. Yeah.
And who actually is trying to win from Brave browser, not Brave, but is it Brave?
It's Brave.
Is it?
Yep.
Who's actually like trying to win that conversation? Because hopefully Brave isn't trying to IPO this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a good year for tech right now. So
no.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. You talk about the Hall and Oates or is it police?
It's the police.
Police. Okay. Yeah. All right. We're all caught up. But who was it that did the auction? Was that Apple that had the girl who finds the secret auction and they're auctioning off all of her data? Do you remember this ad?
I don't.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the listeners, somebody chime in. I know you've seen it. If you've got a YouTube link to those commercials about the, I'm fairly certain it's Apple because I remember seeing it and flipping out. And my family loves it when I do that. When I see something really nerdy on TV and I'm like, oh, you don't understand what's happening right now. But I want to come back to one thing you were saying earlier, Brian. Who created that ad? The marketing department.
Right.
It's all tied together, and they did it because they had funding and support from the CEO to say, I want you to spend this much money to hire creative designers and production team and actors and editors, create this thing. And then we're going to go buy airtime on network channels to get in front of tens of millions of people to let them know that this is an important thing to us. Or they didn't do it out of the kindness of their heart, right? They did it because they think that's going to drive more people to their product and increase their sales.
Yep. Yeah, I mean it's just bringing awareness, right? There's sometimes you buy ads to sell product, and there's sometimes you buy ads to remind people that your competition is shit. So, By the way, that YouTube, I put the spot inside the Twitch. It is the police, in fact, and I did find the actual iSpot TV creepy dude looking over your shoulder. Of course, it's a white dude looking over your shoulder all creepily, but
it has to be right.
It has to be right. So one of the links that John sent me, which I actually found quite humorous because I was like, wow, we're stuck back in the 90s with custom, cursors and stuff, was the New York Times article about the internet didn't turn out the way we'd hoped, and I'm trying to figure out what was their hope of what did they expect the internet to be? I mean. We've talked about it being driven by marketing and all these folks. what did they want it to be? I mean, should it have stopped at 1980, wherever it was, where it was like, 25 terminals inside of 25 universities, or, and what are they expecting it to turn out to be? I mean, we've seen some good examples where you've got like Arab Spring and all those where, Twitter was actually doing some good at the time. And, we see things like that, or we see movements like the Me Too movement where, was disseminating information, and there's people, getting the message out there, but it seems like to me, they're only concentrating on what was the bad parts. So what was your, so Jerod, John, what did you expect the internet to turn out to be, that, when you first saw it, what did you expect it to turn out to be? And it didn't end up being that way.
Freedom of information sharing.
Okay.
I mean, when I was a kid hanging out in BBSs and going on Alta Vista, it astounds me nowadays that Google's pitch was an Alta Vista homepage with advertising, and how advertising leads us to buy, and is double-edged sword of advertising on a website results page. And 20 years later, you have Google doing the same thing.
Mm. Well, they have to make money, right? They have to make money, or they wouldn't have been would they have been as popular today if they didn't start serving ads, or Ask Jeeves was what I grew up on, and then I moved over to
Ask Jeeves was ingenious.
Yeah, I loved it.
How do I put this? The question of do they have to make money is one that I struggle with from a moral perspective. And John's heard me talk. I taught a class for high school seniors who were getting college credit on IT and ethics some years back. And the very first lesson was the distinction between morals, ethics, and laws. Morals, as they described it in the curriculum, was our individual perception of right versus wrong. What am I going to do versus what am I not going to do? There are people, I'll offer up. I love steak, love it. I don't know that I'm ever going to convert to vegetarianism. I just don't. But my daughter-in-law is a vegetarian, and that's a moral thing for her. She does it not just for the health benefits, but the notion of what it takes to put that steak on the table, she's just not cool with. And, I respect that, but that's where we have a difference, a distinction in our beliefs. And when you take a large group of people and bring them together and say, all right, let's talk about these morals that we all have. Which ones do we share? Generally, we think that if somebody has something that belongs to them, some property, it's not okay for somebody else to just take it. Unless you're a corporation, but that's another conversation. But on an individual level, we all agree ethically that there's some things that are okay and not okay. We see that even in the cybersecurity community with responsible disclosure. Is it okay to post an ODay to Twitter or Mastodon, or do we go through responsible disclosure? And so when I look at this question of, they said it's not going to turn out the way they wanted it to, who are they? What community are they? What ethics do they share? Right. And if it's the business community, if it's a group of people who said, we want a way to collect as many data points on individuals as possible so we can increase our sales, then they're sitting back saying, boy, the internet, I'm loving it, loving every second of it. Right. If I look at educational institutions, the fact that I can engage with so many people around the world, right? There's still a very large portion of the global population doesn't have access to this technology. And that's even here in the US, if we look at regions of the United States that have a lower poverty level, we don't grant those folks access to the same digital communities that we have access to. But the ones who do have access can exchange information. They can exchange in e-commerce. I can stand up an Etsy store in 10 minutes and sell whatever I want. I can sit here and draw pictures and sell them. And that's just amazing. Like, to me, that is such an advanced idea when we think about pre-Alexander Graham Bell and the notion that, we couldn't even talk to people unless we sent a letter and waited for weeks to hear back if they even got it. So yeah, I think I like the article. It's a little inflammatory, a little biased from the there are things we wanted from it, but I think the notion that we can do better is at the core of that message,
Right.
or that article, and that's what I take from it. We can do better.
John?
I think those articles actually say that it turned out corrupt, that we had money motivations. We all need to eat, I get it. But if you look at the companies that are on the NASDAQ and the Fortune 500, like the large companies out there, the earlier conversation was on marketing budgets, and it's that sales quota.
Yeah.
Right.
They're pushing products that I need to eat and please buy this. Like, please. Right. And they buy it out of like kindness or due diligence, or because they believe in ethics, because they said they would.
Right.
When they know it doesn't really work. I mean, I know quite a few lawyers in this town of Cleveland, and each of them kind of runs around scared about their data. They're working at the office or they're working remotely. And so how do you protect that? Because they're aware, I can't connect to the Wi-Fi at Panera. Like, right. I can't trust that.
Right.
And it's that type of what internet became. It's,
right.
I'll add to the Zoom chat the presentation I gave in San Diego.
Cool.
The presentation there really was, there's no network perimeter anymore. And how do you guard that?
Right.
And trying to remain, I think, agnostic marketing versus presentation. And I think it did it well. And it's like, hey, here's a variety of solutions. Don't run around crazy like I am, but be aware of what's out there.
I think that's the threat model, right? Some people are more than happy to connect to Panera's Wi-Fi or Starbucks's Wi-Fi. Some people use it for anonymity purposes if they're using a burner laptop to go to whatever nth degree. I think somebody had a joke saying I use the internet, but I'm going to a library to connect to a Tor node to connect to another Tor node somewhere. And I was like, well, if that's your threat model, and we talked a little bit about that beforehand, where John was, telling me, hey, I found vulnerabilities in these things and it may or may not be adjacent to what I work on in my day job. And I was like, well, if you have, APT1 or, NSA's TAO looking at your stuff, it's game over anyway. One of the items in here you talked about was how do we restore sanity and normalcy using a computer when there's persistent threat everywhere. And my comment there was, who's under persistent threat? Do those people know that they're under persistent threat? Or, if your threat model includes APT1, you're pretty much game over anyway, right? You might as well just get rid of all your computers and go live out in the desert somewhere with a horse with no name. Anyway,
I'm with you.
But I think Jared's in Columbus, if it's okay. But I think Ready Player One is focused in Columbus, right?
Yeah. Fictional Columbus, but yeah.
Fictional Columbus. And that's that style of that actor, he knew that character knew their capability and their threat.
Right.
At least be aware of who you are.
Right.
Yeah. The challenge though, John, that I think we run into is, if I look at the three of us talking here right now, we are technical. If we want to, talk ones and zeros, right? Let's roll up the sleeves and let's get nerdy. And we're comfortable in that space. When we start using that language with people who aren't technical, they shut off. And you've seen it. You've seen the eyes glass over. You've heard them ask questions about when the conversation's going to be done. You've seen them check their watch or their phone, because the thing that we talk about when we say you got to figure this out makes them uncomfortable. And it's not in our nature to embrace discomfort, unless you're David Goggins, but that's a special case, right? But with and this, John, is where I look at the tech you've built. If we've got ways, and I'm offering this perspective up, I'm going to bring it up to the CISO level. If I can protect my people without them having to figure out security, everybody's better off. I'm not making them uncomfortable. I'm not putting unrealistic expectations on them. I have put some kind of technology in place that will keep them safe from threats they don't even want to know about. And I think until we see more organizations embrace that model, not just say, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we did it, but actually build technology that does that, we're constantly going to be behind the curve, and we're constantly going to be losing the data breach, right? Pull down the IBM report, pull down the Ponemon report, pull down the Verizon report. It's uglier every single year. They're saying, look,
the data gets worse every time.
Yeah, it keeps getting worse. But like, John, when I look at Thor and I look at some of the capabilities of what you've built, that's exactly the approach we should be taking. And
it's that matter of privacy. It's that matter of security, that I'm that privacy security geek, and I don't want 3, 4-letter or 5-letter agencies on my laptop, and neither should you.
Right.
And you should be able to authenticate, is this me?
Yeah.
This darn thing's with you the whole darn time.
Right.
I mean,
well, I think it goes further. Is this me? And is this really me? Is it, because like you said, you can authenticate on your phone. If I don't lock my screen, my wife could go in and go, yes, it is me. It is Brian. Yes,
it is Brian. Let's click OK.
Yeah. Right.
But there's a heuristic there. And that's what I've built to differentiate and provide you assurance. You are yourself.
Right.
You should be able to take ownership of your ethics, your actions, and do what you want to do.
Right. I did that. I have a
unique...
thumb. I have a thumbprint. I can do that.
We got the thumbs. We got the
That's right. I got thumbs and eyeballs and hair and DNA and stuff. Is that the only way to prove integrity, though? I mean, unless it's something that you can't lose, like your biometrics is the ultimate, and then of course you get the jokes of you can only change your password 10 times or what have you.
Yeah.
When we talk about creating those identities or creating that privacy or what have you, I don't see the blockchain doing it for us. And I don't know if that's a marketing problem or, somebody can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't answer that. I'm not that I don't want to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I first heard about blockchain in 2010. It was neat math. And I guess I'm the alpha adopter that it looks cool. Right. It does fancy things. I didn't apply it to my bank because I didn't want it at my bank, but people do. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. Doesn't mean they're right. It's the new paradigm shift that if it's a collective good, I'll probably join in.
Right.
A decade plus later, I finally own Ethereum. It took me 13 years.
Oh, and it's probably tanked too since you bought it.
Yeah, mine did. Yeah.
Although,
actually,
proof of work versus proof of stake, right? We're seeing innovation in that space, even if the general folks aren't watching. But where I think we've got the potential of solving that problem in the blockchain is around the notion of identity proofing and the immutability of the chain. If I create a ledger entry, I'm just going to bring it right down and say this is Jerod, right? And anytime you want my social, my driver's license, I'm trying to cross the border and you want to check my passport, whatever the thing is you want, you're going to call to the chain. It's going to say, Jerod, do you approve this transaction? I'm going to say I approve it. I'm going to grant you access to that data element, and then we're on our merry way. The immutability of the chain means once I drop it in there, it never changes. And then we do that proofing at the time. Well, not at the time of the proofing is when we create that data element. But if at any point the thing gets compromised, right, that mechanism or the way to get to that data element can't be trusted. If we've got a revocation process in place to say negate that blockchain entry, and then this new blockchain entry is the current version of Jerod, then the
Right.
way we solve the problem is around identity proofing and revocation.
Right.
But the implementation of the technology, it's not that blockchain solves the technology. That's what the product companies and the marketing teams are trying to sell. But it's rather that model gives us a way to move away from centralized control of that information. Yep. And say, instead of the company owning your data, you own your data.
Right.
And then you, again, grant permission to it.
Yep.
I'll put in the chat this website, Brian, that Jerod shared with me, the Identity Foundation.
Yeah.
And if you look at the top people on that list, I happen to know a little bit that Microsoft and Consensus are up there. And so it dawned on me after a conversation that it may be blockchain as the new login authentication thing. And where I can go with the assurance of the technology that I've built, make your login in the clouds, put it in the sky.
Well, yeah, I use my @live.com account to log into my boxes since Windows 8.1 or whatever. But I mean, there's a lot of people that don't trust Microsoft, or they're part of the problem. So I mean, we're going back to how far can you trust the Microsofts or the Googles of the world to keep your OAuth tokens, or to be the second factor?
I don't think you can, to be honest. I don't think you can. I think you have to trust people like myself, like us three here. People that have good intentions.
That's the
people that have balanced ethics.
When we talk about the notion of a decentralized autonomous organization, we're talking about people contributing to the organization for the thing that it was built to create, with the technology that works. And you're not shareholders for the sake of turning a profit. If I go back to the earliest days of the open source community and why open source has grown to be as important and as powerful as it is, every tech we use, the call we're on right now, there's open source something under the covers, right, or behind the scenes that we don't know what it is, but it's there. That mentality is, I'm going to make something and I'm going to put it out and we're going to use it and we're going to work together. I'm not doing this in order to increase my personal portfolio, right?
Right.
And the question though is more of a social one. While we're building those things, how do we pay for food? How do we pay for housing?
Right.
Or how do we? I shouldn't say it that way. How do I get housing? Right. It's not a matter of I've got to earn money and pay money. It's how do I achieve Maslow's hierarchy, and then the things on top of that are important to me and my family.
I think, Brian, you asked early on, like, what would the internet have become? And part of me thinks this blockchain immutability thing, I don't want to see some authoritarian, dare I say, president go and take blockchain for their own personal use, like you see in to remain apolitical, but you see it in some regions of some countries of tracking every person everywhere and rounding them all up.
Right.
And those are all blockchained people. And it's, what do you want to do with this technology?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the filthy capitalist in me, but we were talking about Mastodon before, and I was like, it's great, it's decentralized, and the problem is, and I see the same thing with open source. It's like, and I see it in other places. But it's like, oh, I don't like this Mastodon instance, I'm going to go and create my own, or and then you've got 30,000 Mastodon instances, and it waters down. The Linux is the same way. Oh, I don't like this version of Linux. I'm going to go create 500,000 versions of it, and then it gets watered down. And people joked about the year of Linux on the desktop, and we still try to get to that, but it's like the more options that people have, the more watered down it gets, and the harder it is to adopt things or new technologies, or to move in any specific direction. I mean, it's like, it would be great if we had Linux kernel, and then it's like we only had one or two different places, but we've got so much option. It's I don't want to say it's an embarrassment of riches, but it's almost like an analysis paralysis where it's like, we don't know which direction we can go. We just know we have Linux, and it's like, well, there's one of a million places we could go, or a million different directions we could go, and it really waters down the messaging there. It's like, there's no one solution here, and I don't know how do we. We're not going to solve that problem here, but I mean, it's like, what do we do? I mean, it's like, obviously there's more than one blockchain, right? Which blockchain is the right blockchain to use?
Well, that too, but then you have other, not to go too deep in the weeds, because I'll start saying that I shouldn't be saying, or about corporations I shouldn't be talking about, but there's a version of Linux out there that was acquired by a very larger company. And what you see there is Rocky Linux or Alma Linux. And Alma Linux has a governance board. So that other version of Linux cannot be, the other version of Linux was acquired.
Right.
But Alma Linux, at some capacity, is looking to never be acquired. Because they don't like that major large corporation.
Right.
And it's the version of, what do you want? And I don't think people on the whole across middle America, not knocking, if you're there, say hi, are really present as much, dare I suggest, as the pedestrians walking around Los Angeles or Brooklyn, New York. They're just not. It's not that type of mindset.
Right. Right.
It's interesting to see that Nebraska is becoming a cybersecurity startup capital. Lincoln, Nebraska. But
do we blame Warren Buffett there for that? Is that what we're doing?
I think that might be a bit of it. I don't know.
Means they're going to be throwing funding at startups. Keep an eye out. You heard it from Jess.
Well,
Brian, there's a balance to be struck. With all things, and you're right. They I could go back to I won't use that analogy. I don't want to piss anybody off. I'll just say there's a balance to be struck in all things, and you're right. When I'm building cybersecurity programs, I tell every one of my clients, complexity is the enemy of security. If everybody's got their own file sharing solution because they like it, and you want me to protect against data exfiltration, too bad. I can't keep track of all these individual things. So if you want security, then there's a trade-off. If you want, as a CEO, to enable your people to move quickly and do what they want, however they want, and you're willing to take those risks, right? You have a higher risk tolerance. Then that balance isn't a specific number, right? It's not a line in the sand. It's a lot blurrier. But I see your point. It's a good one.
There was a meeting I went to, not to go too bad, but the companies that they're IPOing, that are on they're on those things, that they have to give 72 hours to their shareholders of an incident.
Right.
Yeah.
And 24 hours of a payment to an adversary. Which just means your attackers are going to go through your 10K filings to find out which one's the more valuable people to attack.
Right. Yeah.
Why do we do this?
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this last Sunday. It was like, don't use the B word, because once you start using the word breach, then the 72-hour clock goes. You can't you can't say breach, or you can't talk to your lawyers about a breach. You have to work the incident and go, you have to go on the assumption that, there isn't a breach, even though you may think that there's a breach, but it starts that clock the minute you say that B word, and you have to watch.
You used the right word, and I'm very proud to hear that. You got to work the incident.
Right.
Because until you've got the definitive proof of data exfil, it is not a breach. No, that's a tough one, but good point.
Yeah. Yep. So I want to be cognizant. I know John has something he needs to get to. Any last thoughts here before we go? I think this has been a great show. I hope everybody on the chat's gotten something out of it. And, but yeah, I'd just like to thank you both coming. Jerod, we'll go with you, and then we'll end up with John. So any last thoughts here on just overall what we've talked about and how we move on from here?
Yeah. My ask for listeners, and again, folks, thanks for chiming in and listening to us rant. I honestly and sincerely appreciate it. Explore other disciplines and bring disciplines outside of cybersecurity to your world. I think, again, I'm fortunate that I ended up in cybersecurity and it wasn't my undergrad. I didn't plan from the time I graduated high school to end up where I am. And it's enabled me to have conversations with people about more, what's the fine arts, the humanitarians, whatever the language is for what they teach you in school these days.
The humanities.
Right? The humanities. Thank you. Could not find that word. But don't hide from those conversations, right? I don't want to encourage anybody to get into an HR violation, right? I don't want you to lose your job. But if we're not talking about the social impacts, the financial impacts, if anybody ever uses the word "it's just business," you're wrong. And I never tell people you're wrong, but I stand by that. You've got to bring these different perspectives into what we're doing in cybersecurity and understand that it's not just ones and zeros. The ones and zeros is a key part of it. But I'd encourage you, when you're getting training and when you're asking people to, give me budget to go out and learn a thing, learn outside of cybersecurity, bring more of that knowledge in, find those people in your company and bring them into your meetings and conversations, because I think that's how we move forward. That's how we make the biggest impact.
Awesome. Excellent. John, let's take it home.
I included my link to the Ohio State Women's Cybersecurity in the chat. I tried to log into Twitch, but my Twitch account, like other stuff, is murky at best.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Can I share the slides from B-Side San Diego and the
Absolutely,
the
yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Just wanted to make sure I'll put those in the show notes.
I'm late to that. I'm pretty busy adding radio protocols to my technology, so go figure.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
But I think I would welcome another opportunity to speak with you again, and to really just get out there to everyone beyond those that are listening, that we need to have a whole paradigm shift of how you operate, how you actually think, to be aware that these are the threats out there.
I would love to do that too. We can definitely discuss that and see what we can do to get you on again. Because I found some of my most favorite podcasts are stuff that isn't necessarily security related, where we talk about the non-security parts of the security world, in this case, the people stuff, and a lot of what we were talking about tonight is just awesome. So I probably will go back and listen to this again. John, Jerod, and some guy who just happens to be hosting the show. But I'd love to have you back on, and Jerod as well. We'd love to have you back on and talk about that. Maybe we'll get Mr. Betcher and Miss Berlin on to help guide some more conversations. So, other than LinkedIn, how would people, I think I posted the LinkedIn earlier in the chat, but I'll definitely add y'all back later. Is there any other ways that people could contact you if they wanted to talk about maybe something that John's working on, or, talk to Jerod about being fractional CISOs, or what is that like? How would they get a hold of y'all? Jerod?
Yeah, you said we're not, we don't have control of our privacy anymore. I'm okay with sharing contact info. If you have any interest in the vCISO stuff, our CEO literally posted a job a few minutes before we started recording the podcast.
Oh, nice.
Company's growing. You can reach it at sidechannel.com. And then my email is Jerod@sidechannel.com. Okay. If you want to talk about any of this stuff, hit me up there. Okay. But I am heavy on LinkedIn. I haven't opened up my Mastodon account yet. I don't know which way to go. This decentralization stuff has me all confused. But LinkedIn and Jerod@sidechannel.com are the two best ways to hit me up.
Awesome. John?
I would joke to that end, smoke and mirrors, but it's now 2023. I have email that I don't mind sharing. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way.
Okay. All right. I think I posted that up earlier too, but I'll make sure that it gets into our show notes so everybody can take a look. So
I appreciate it. And beyond that, schedule some time with me and have a discussion just like this.
Okay. Yeah, sounds great.
We're looking at technology of where it can and cannot go. So if you're in Tampa, you can see me in Tampa in 3 weeks. If you're in Columbus, you can see me next week. If you're going to be at the RSA conference, you can see me there.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, yeah, RSA, $900 a night rooms. So you got that going for you. And they say capitalism is dead. Anyway, well, thank you both so much for coming. Thank you all for hanging out with me today. And we're not gonna be rating anybody because I don't want to do that. But thank you everybody for coming. This has been Breaking Down Security. Go check us out at BrakeSec on Twitter, at Brian Brake. You can follow me there. Amanda Berlin is at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. She's also on Hackers Health, is her nonprofit for bringing to light mental health issues in the information security community. You can also check out Mr. Betcher at BetcherPwned, BoettCherPwned. And you can check out our website at breakingsecurity.com. That's BRAKEING security.com. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. And have a good day. Take care of yourselves, because as we're fond of saying here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.